Hey there, Robert and Erik.
Hello. But hi, Mom.
Hey, I'm
Long,
going to give you a
long
choice.
time no speak.
Yeah, I know, just less than 15 seconds ago. But anyway, so, here's a choice for you, Erik and Robert.
Yeah.
We could talk about what to do for Native Americans. There's got this increase, they have an increased suicide and, a bunch of stuff like that. We could talk about singleness. Why do some people stay single even if they don't want that? And how can they change that? Or we could talk about, how to deal with being raised by haters. And or we can talk about euthanasia. So I gave you four choices. Go for it. What do you
He
want to
said,
talk about?
"Oh, which do I choose?
Oh
Oh, oh, oh. Let's talk about the single ladies."
no! All the single ladies, all the single ladies, all the single. Come on, you have to sing too.
All the
Eric,
single ladies.
sing. All right, well,
Yeah,
let's talk about it.
that's probably not,
Why do
not
some
good.
people stay single?
He said everything in the universe is about whatever it is you focus on. So if
Okay.
you're constantly focused on, I'm single, I'm lonely, there's no one for me, well, he says that's what you're going to get.
Yeah,
You're
of
always going to
course.
be single.
Yeah.
And when you go out and you put vibes out into the world looking for that husband or wife,
Mm-hmm.
they're going to pick up on the vibe that you don't that he said they're going to see it as potentially as needy, or they just won't see you at all,
Oh
right?
God, yeah, sure.
Or they won't pick up on the vibes that you're interested, right? Because what your intention and what it is that you've really been focusing on, and the reason you were even compelled to go out there and go after people is because you feel like you're alone, right? He says this is such a cliche, but it is true. He says, everyone always says you find someone when you're not looking for them. It's because you're just no longer focused on the fact that you're lonely.
Mm.
And then when you don't focus on the fact that you're lonely, then you find that you no longer are.
So it's like a law of attraction thing.
It's a
What?
paradox too,
Yeah, when you have this whole thought process is I'm lonely, I'm lonely. The universe is like a Xerox machine. It's copying that whole reality
Well,
for you.
he says, you get in one of these situations where you sit there and you think, you spend all of your time alone wondering why you're lonely, right?
Oh,
He says it's a paradox.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
And literally, that's what goes on when you tell yourself that. And as far as the
Yeah.
universe is concerned, you're asking to always be lonely.
Yeah.
Um, and and it can be very difficult for a person, when we're wired to pair bond.
Yeah.
Um, that desire starts to instill anxiety or insecurity or whatever.
Well, sure.
You start wanting to go and pursue that, thinking that that's going to make it happen.
Yeah.
But most people who are lonely and want to be in a relationship and stuff, they tend to they don't always fully, he said, project their true self. They tend to
Okay.
have a feeling of sadness or separation within
Oh,
them.
yeah. Yeah.
And a person though who attracts a lot of mates and stuff and does not feel lonely, they tend to have this energy that just kind of glows, right?
Mm.
Um, and they get more mates that way and stuff
Mm.
because they're not coming from that place. I hope what he's saying makes
Oh, it
sense.
makes
I'm not
sense. Yeah.
completely paying attention, but
So, do some people come in staying single for a spiritual contract reason?
he said for damn sure, yeah. He said he said for some people it's about learning what separation really means and to understand that it's an illusion.
Mm. Yeah.
And to go, so he said humans are about evolving beyond what their primitive natures have compelled them to do.
Mm-hmm.
So he said that there are certain souls that come into this life and they were never meant to pair bond.
Mm.
And they could spend their whole lives looking for that knight in shining armor or that beautiful princess or whatever. And he or she never shows up,
Mm.
right? And eventually they get to a point where, he said, hopefully they get that, at some point while they're still alive, they kind of resign themselves without the depression of that may come with
Yeah.
that.
Without
But he
the,
said,
oh, woe is me. I'm
well, because he
doomed to
said,
be alone. Yeah.
he said, but what's interesting and what's the paradox of that is that once they get that, right,
Mm-hmm.
and they let go of it. He said this goes back to the whole when you're not looking anymore, right?
Yeah.
He said for some of those people, once they become happy and they're just like, well, then this is just how my life is, and they don't go into the sadness and the grief over it all, or rather they may grieve it, but then they get beyond it, right? They move on. He said for some of those people, potentially they could then meet that person. Mm. But it may not be the husband or the wife. It might be the friend.
Yeah.
A friend that was their soulmate, but they weren't meant to be romantically involved. Mm-hmm. Right? And for some of these people who are lonely, that could very well be their scenario too. Mm-hmm. Right? They could have that friend in their life who is always there for them that they don't see because they're wanting the romantic side of it.
Yeah. Well, there's biology behind that, though.
Right, right. He said, and that's what I was talking about earlier about the human desire to pair bond.
Yeah.
Right? He says, when we evolve, he says, as humans evolve, they start to recognize what what instinctually they've been programmed to do. Mm-hmm. And then from a conscious level, they understand, start to become aware that they actually have the ability to reprogram that themselves, put that in a new way. So for some people, then they get to the point where pair bonding is not what they're being driven to do anymore. Okay. It's more about, I exist as an individual, and
or I'm okay with a good friend.
Maybe. Right.
Well, it seems,
and they may, and for some people, the pair bonding can be not so much about being alone or just coupled with one person. Sometimes the pair bonding is because they really want a family, right?
Sure.
And for some of them, the lesson might be that the people that are in their lives already, as friends, for instance, or just your fellow human beings, that they're all part of your family too. He said a lot of people don't get to that point where they can see that, though.
Yeah, it's hard.
Because because he said they want ownership. They want, in a sense, a kind of ownership, but also...
they want to own a spouse and own children. That's my children. Is that what you're saying?
Right. Okay. And then there's the other side of them, too, that wants to be part of a small little tribe.
Yeah.
A lot of people feel like, as human beings, especially right now, when they're not in a small little tribe, it's like, well, or if they are in a small little tribe, it's like everybody notices each other, right? And they all take care of each other. Yeah. But the way human beings are right now in our evolution, if you are in a big tribe, a global tribe, you're going to get lost in the mix. Yeah. Because most human beings are not geared towards paying attention to another human being like you would if it were a small, close-knit group. We haven't gotten to that point on a global scale yet.
Yeah.
So he said it's perfectly natural why some people would never be able to see all humans as that.
Well, for me and my family, I don't know. Sometimes I feel like it's nice to have my little close-knit family because it's us against the world,
Yeah. Well, right. Well, he said that's part of the reason. He said, at this point in human evolution, that's just a symptom of how the world is like that. Mm-hmm. Like everybody seems to be against each other, right? And he said on an individual level, like what you just referred to, he says that actually is teaching the collective rather, that we can still have that same close-knitness. Well,
say that 15 times real fast.
Close-knitness.
Oh, that's pretty good.
On a global scale, right?
Yeah.
So we're teaching ourselves that. But he said, but it's also, like you just said, or like he just said rather, that we are so separate from one another, and when we feel we have to bond in little groups.
Mm-hmm. Okay. But it seems like part of it could be, being single. It could be a problem if you just have a problem being comfortable with who you are. Some people don't like to be alone with themselves. Maybe you could speak to that. Arlene, can you close the door?
He said that's right, Mom. He said, and that's what he said, like in a very subtle way, that's what I was inferring when a person is always telling themselves they're alone and stuff. I don't see how you were inferring that though. But anyway,
Yeah, don't be subtle. I mean, it's like spirituality for dummies. Hello, come on,
he
spell
said,
it
"Hey,
out in black and white,
he
boy.
said, hey, listen, mom." He said, "Hey, listen, mom. You know me. I start to get on a topic and then I ramble. And even though I had that in my head, then I like, uh, don't bring it up. And then, you bring it up for me." He said, "That's what's so great about you. You always got my back."
Oh, I try. That's what mommies are for, partly,
He said, "Moms are great."
and to kiss and blow on boo boos, which I did many a time for you, didn't I?
Because he said I had lots of boo-boos.
You had so many boo boos. Oh my gosh, I remember.
He said I
And
took
we found
after
out you were just half blind because you had amblyopia. But I swear to God, I remember going to a Pizza Hut one time, and you were like 16 months old, and your whole head was covered with bruises because you were learning, you were walking and boom, boom. And
Oh.
I swear to God, all of a sudden I thought, oh my God, people are looking at this and they must think I'm a child abuser because it looked like somebody just beat him with a rolling pin, just boom, 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 all over his forehead. It was sad.
Oh, you're funny.
Oh, Polly likes her squeaky toy.
She loves her toys.
So,
He
all
said,
right.
he
So,
said, he said I took after you, Mom. He
I
said,
know I'm so clumsy. Okay, well, let's talk a little bit more about that singleness being related to how what the lack of comfort with who you are.
yeah, he said that is he said when I talked about earlier how a person is focused on they're lonely, they're lonely, they're lonely.
Mm.
He said he said that's right. It's a distraction from looking at yourself and
You need
asking
to be your
yourself,
own best friend, I guess.
right. And he said, and this is what this goes into how you can break out of the cycle of always focusing on being lonely.
Mm.
You have to start asking yourself, well, why do I want to focus on that, right? And for a lot of people, it's going to be because you don't want to look at yourself.
Mm. It can be scary
For,
sometimes.
for some people, that's what they really need to do. They need to figure out, well, what habits do I have that are perpetuating my misery? And for other people, he says, and this is where you just can't say it's a one thing, right? It depends on whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, he says, because introverts really like to get into the insides of themselves, right? And observe themselves. And some introverts, they distract themselves from that by focusing on the loneliness side of things. Because an introvert tends to feel more lonely. They feel very separate from everyone else because they do all of their exploring up here.
Well, what's wrong with that?
Nothing.
So why would that make you lonely if you really enjoyed it?
Because Eric says if you're only exploring, if you don't like yourself or there's things about yourself that you're scared to explore, then you won't be doing any of that work.
Well, what if you do like yourself and you like exploring?
Eric says if you're an introvert and you do like yourself, then you're not necessarily going to feel lonely because you're always going to be engaged, with looking at yourself, with observing other people, things like that.
Of course, there's always that desire to be part of the collective because we are part of the collective. So there must be a pull.
For introverts to be part of the collective?
Or anybody, really.
Yeah, absolutely. We're all wired to do that. But he said for some people though who are introverts, they can feel part of the collective without actually participating with other people. Right? They can just be, and I mean like actively participate.
I see.
So,
I see. Yeah.
So they can be sitting in a park and surrounded by people, but no one's talking to them, and they're perfectly happy.
They still feel connected.
They still feel connected, right?
Okay. So to be comfortable with yourself, what does that take? Just really processing what you don't like about yourself and getting real about it, and letting go of certain things, forgiving yourself, not judging yourself. Oh, I'm just throwing it all out there. What? Tell me.
He said the simplest answer is you have to accept your humanness and all that means.
Okay.
Right? And let go of all of the shame that we as human beings have taught ourselves to feel about being human.
And figure out where that shame came from. Maybe it's a parent or a peer or, yeah.
It could come from the culture itself.
Yeah. Maybe it's not really your judgment.
Well, it never is. Erik said that judgment and shame and regret and blame and all these kinds of things, ultimately they're rooted in fear, but the labels of shame and regret and judgment and those kinds of things are taught.
Yeah.
Those are behaviors that are taught.
Damn society.
Well, Erik says, throughout human history, especially when we were in earlier times, when we were more primitive and much more aggressive than we are now, those were things that were necessary to keep ourselves alive. And they were also there in order to ensure that we as a species, over time, very slowly, work through those things and start to bring ourselves closer and closer together to each other. Mm-hmm. And we're getting to that point, Erik says, now.
Okay.
So now we're being faced with letting go of those old habits.
Yeah.
Right? And this is, Erik said, what light workers are doing in various ways is, for some of them, it's about making human beings let go of their fear of no longer existing as a human or the loss of things, people, animals, whatever. And so mediums help them to reconnect to the spirits of those individuals, okay, and help expand their awareness of what it means to be alive. Right? Okay. For other light workers, it's about Erik says, like some of the spiritual gurus that are in the world right now. It's about expanding your awareness of your emotional side. For some of them, Erik says, it's about learning how to manifest things. Polly, she's making a lot of noise. It's about learning how to manifest a lot of things, right? And in order to do that, that's also about letting go, which ties back to how, a spirit, a medium who is connecting someone to spirit is teaching you. Okay. And Erik says, and if you really think about it, light workers in general are all about teaching you how to let go.
Yeah, it's so hard.
It really is. Because, Erik says letting go would never even be a thing if human beings knew how to accept change.
Okay.
Is that really loud, that barking?
No, it's no big deal.
Okay, good.
All right, so last question on singleness. What do you tell a person who is single? Hi, Steve, I'm talking about you, and doesn't want to be single. I didn't say his last name. We're good. Oh, hush up, guys. Pause. I gotta let these dogs out.
Okay. Polly! Sorry.
Okay, here I am. What in the world just happened?
I yelled at Polly, and then I was like, oh, wait, I'm still on video.
Uh-oh. All right. Yeah, you're a dog abuser, and everybody knows it now. Sad. Oh. I'm going to call the SPCA out on you.
No, she's my child.
I know. Oh. All right, so what, Erik?
Erik says, well, in that case, stop being so picky. That's what he said.
Oh, well, Steve, yeah, okay. Well, why are some people so picky? Because I do have a number of people in my lives that are,
right,
veteran bachelors because they are too freaking picky.
He said, again, Mom, it goes back to...
That's fear. It got to be fear.
It's a distraction from the self. It's always focused
what do you mean?
on...
Oh, because they're focusing on themselves?
No, Erik says they're not focusing on themselves. He says they're focusing on what everybody in society says would be the ideal this or ideal that. Okay. And that's all external to who you are.
Okay.
So you start, and Erik says, and it's focused all on the external of everything, right? He said some extroverts can do that, right? Mm-hmm. They get very focused on all the externals and they start looking for perfection. Because they themselves are perfectionists.
Do they look externally at that person?
If they're doing that kind of thing.
Do they look at external aspects, like whether they're pretty or not, handsome or not, whether they have money and all?
It's just lots of different things. It could be their looks, or it could be a habit that they have, or maybe they breathe too loud or whatever, right? But Erik says all of those things, though, if you think about it and look back at it, at the individual who's feeling that way, it's because there's a lot of things they judge perfect in themselves or imperfect in themselves, right?
So what do you
do? They don't really like themselves.
Just try to look at the soul of the person that they might be interested in?
He said, no. He said, you have to, again, go back to, this is really, I don't like myself. Mm. If they breathe too loud, if they, have a blemish on their face, if they, all these things, right? that person is just a mirror of you as another human being, right? And they're just reflecting back to you what you don't like about yourself.
Mm.
So you have to get to a point where you really like yourself.
Yeah.
And then you'll stop picking apart other people. And you'll also find that you don't pick apart yourself either, because Erik says, ultimately, if you're picking apart a partner all the time, you're probably, not probably, Erik says you are also picking yourself apart all the time.
Mm. So, for Steve, he needs to basically figure out how to love himself again.
Right. To accept himself as he is.
Right. Anything else?
He said, once you do that, everything else will fall into place.
Okay.
Partner, all that stuff. Because
All
Erik
right.
says you can't do it backwards.
Mm-mm.
Right.
No, absolutely not.
Erik said this goes back to, the whole talk we had about loneliness and all of that kind of stuff, right? You have to start within yourself, and you can't go outside. If you're already feeling lonely and you're going out into the world trying to find someone that will no longer make you feel lonely or take that loneliness away, you may find someone, but then you'll realize you still feel lonely.
Yeah.
And it's all because it goes back to you.
It always goes back to you.
You have to work that out,
It always does.
You know.
You have to work out your relationship with yourself before you can work on your relationship with life.
And it's kind of interesting because Erik says it's like a contradiction, because Erik says, you get to you realize that when you have, whatever kinds of discomfort that you're going through, it's there to call attention to you to Erik says, investigate yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the universe calls attention to that because the universe is saying that this is all ultimately about focusing on yourself, right? Focusing on yourself in a negative way, right? And once you start to get through those negative perceptions about the self, which is you start to all of a sudden, paradoxically, or whatnot, you stop focusing then on the self, and then you start to realize that the happiness comes from no longer doing that.
Yeah.
Right. But that's where the contradiction comes in, because you needed to go and do the work of focusing on the self in order to heal the things that you were uncomfortable with about the self.
And accept and let go.
And accept those things, and then you find you don't need to focus on the self anymore.
Oh, easier said than done, but wise words. All right, now, one last question. And I'm not going to share my political affiliation, but I want to, and maybe we'll have a longer thing about the whole presidential blah, blah, blah. But Erik, what presidential candidate would be better for this country, for better or for worse?
Erik said,
and you have got to get your filters out of the way, Robert, because
I know.
It's going to be hard, but you're going to have to do it.
What
would be better for humanity?
Well, first I'll state what my thoughts are, and this way then Erik can state his, and maybe that will pull my filters out of the way.
Okay.
Personally, I don't like either of them.
I don't either. I know, but the lesser of the evils, oh, God.
So, and so again, this is my own, things. It just feels like a lot of, the political system and stuff has just turned into...
It's been awful.
Well, it's just turned into about entertainment, and
it's a circus.
And about how much money the person may have and whatever, and pandering to, certain individuals that are a small minority that fund their campaigns, and then that becomes what everybody has to vote for. But anyway, Erik said, when you asked the question, he said, "Oh, Mom."
I knew it. I'm going to get in trouble, but might as well. Okay, you know what? Just shoot the messenger. Don't shoot the messenger. Shoot Erik.
You're right.
Oh, that's right. He already did it himself. Oh, my God.
It's terrible.
I know. It's sad. Very sad. But seriously, who would be the better of the evils? Oh, this is hard for you, Robert. I know.
No. He's just explaining to me. He's going through the different scenarios for what would happen when either of them become elected, and he said that the outcomes for either of them will be the same.
Okay.
He said, "So honestly, Mom, it's a wash between them, really."
Okay.
He said, Trying to pick out what he was saying. Something about Trump.
Well, Trump is
For
scary. He
Trump,
seems like a loose cannon. It's like the
right,
things that
right.
come out
Well,
of his mouth. Would
that's
he
what he was
be a
saying.
better statesman if he's in office?
Eric said that with Trump, he was kind of teasing out the subtle differences between them.
Mm.
I don't see how these are subtle, but he says that they're subtle. For Trump, it's more of the country as a whole under him would become not the whole country, but like a certain group of them, of people, would become, there would be a small group and they'd be more vocal and they tended to be more on the aggressive side of things. They'd be more emboldened to be aggressive and potentially violent,
Mm-hmm.
right? But it's a very small group. Um, that's just like on the human psychology thing side of things. But then from the governance side, whether it be the Democrat or the Republican, there's going to still be a lot of the same things that happen
Ugh.
because he says that everything is so ingrained in how our culture is ingrained under a
It's
certain.
bigger than a presidency, in other words.
Right, right. That's what he was
Okay.
to.
All right. As it stands right now, who will win? And this free will, so it'll change next week, I'm sure.
Oh Lord, I don't know if this is going to be accurate at all because
No, because it changes. Everything changes. Yeah.
yeah.
Or maybe we shouldn't
He's
say
telling
this.
me that when it comes to the race, at this point in time, it will be very close between the two of them.
Okay. All right. I believe that. Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Thank you,
Which
Erik.
one? I don't know because, I mean,
Well,
I think this is probably me, but it's, thinking this, but I always like hear Clinton, but then it could be Trump. I don't know.
yeah.
That's a hard one because there's just too much information out there. That's where, as a medium, it's good to not have information.
I
'Cause
know.
then your brain doesn't get in the way.
Don't watch TV, people. I try to stay away. I watch the DIY channel, so I can
That's
like probably build or remodel a house single-handedly now. I
you know what
know how to do it.
it's funny because I watch HGTV. I just
Oh
leave
yeah,
it,
I love that one too. It's
and
good.
I find that even if I'm not paying attention to it, just having that in the background, all of a sudden I started having this innate like knowledge of like, well, this is what I would need to do to fix that and stuff. Even though
I
I'm not
know.
mechanical at
And it's
all.
fixing stuff. It's making things beautiful. It's making things functional. It's just instead of the news. Anyway, all
Right.
right. Well, thank you, Robert. Thank you,
Yep.
Erik.
Thank you.
Thank you to our listeners or
Yeah.
watchers
Eric's,
who
Eric's
like
blowing,
to watch.
Eric's blowing you and everybody out there a big kiss.
I love you. Come visit me, okay?
He said, "Of course, Mom."
All right. You guys watch for the stuff at the end, the message at the end, please. And please like and subscribe. It really helps me. I have a lot of watchers, but, I don't have, I want more subscribers. So just subscribe. That's all you have to do. Easy. One
Link,
click.
link, and subscribe.
Bye.
Bye.